Welcome to the story behind the story, a behind-the-scenes exploration of the human experience in all aspects of life, love, and leadership. Today, we're going to explore with Juan Betancourt, CEO of Humantelligence, a software company focused on smarter collaboration, the intersection between consciousness, high performance, and software. I'm your host, Angie Bailey.
Hi, I'm your co-host, Lynette Sproles.
Hi, and I'm also co-host Dominic Petty.
Juan, it is such a pleasure to have this opportunity to chat with you today. You currently lead a software company, yet you've also worked in C-level positions in the private sector for Puma and Decathlon in Europe. So I have a couple questions for you. Could you just at least explore with us or tell us the path that you took to get where you are today, and even what prompted you to leave recruiting and to go into the software business and what you're trying to accomplish with this?
Sure. Thanks, Angela. My path was a more traditional path earlier in my career where it was about self-development. And I worked at the traditional companies like Procter & Gamble, Reebok, Puma, the corporates. Then I decided to kind of start following my passion and not just look at getting developed. And so I took my career more into my own hands in my late 20s, early 30s, and went to work in sports, which I loved sports growing up and playing at a high level, and worked for a big sports retailer, manufacturer called Decathlon. They're the largest in the world, actually bigger than Nike, several times bigger. And then I also became a headhunter. And then the third phase of my career was to go off the beaten path where people thought, what are you doing? You're crazy. Why did you go to Harvard and Wharton for your MBA to go work as a headhunter? And I became a headhunter, not listening to other people, but doing what I knew I was really good at and what I had a passion for. And so I started doing less than learning. And then I realized now in this current phase of my life, I wanted to build something. I wanted to impact tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. And that you don't usually do in the big corporate sense. You can do that building a company. And so I launched Humantelligence 6 years ago to really impact consciousness at work, or consciousness through work, where people spend most of their week, and improving the collaboration between employees now that the way we've all worked has changed and being distributed. So whether remote, hybrid, or back to work, but distributed, human connection has gone down. And so we found a great tool and developed a tool to bring consciousness, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence in all collaboration platforms that people use. And that's been my career in a nutshell.
I would agree about the connection with people has really deteriorated. And I'm watching that as I'm doing some, now I'm kind of doing freelance work and not actually in an office setting anymore. And I don't know, I find it a little disconcerting, if you will, that folks, it seems like even kindness seems to have gotten off the beaten path somehow. And so I couldn't agree more that there needs to be this, as you put it, like a level of consciousness that's built into the work environment.
So Juan, I'm curious, when it comes to finding high performance individual and high performance teams, one trait that really seems to go hand in hand with people at this level is a high level of self-awareness. And I'm just curious, looking beyond human intelligence itself and kind of exploring the self-awareness factor, what purpose drives you in helping others achieve this high level of performance?
Whether I was a U.S. national team soccer player or a member of the 9th best basketball team in the country or the second fastest miler on a track team in the country, all these things I achieved with team. And the sense of pride, engagement, happiness was really unparalleled. Even when it came to work, the most memorable moments in my career, whether they're large companies, small companies, a successful project or a failed project, was a great working team. Even in my personal life, my greatest moments have never been just with one other person. It's been as I've built community and groups to bring them together and create a vibration across a group or team. The parallels in my life around team that have let me vibrate at my highest vibration, impacting the most people, is at the team unit. And I believe in the workplace and for corporates, and we at Humantelligence have signed a enterprise-wide deal with Accenture for 700,000 people. And the reason they use our tool is for the same reason I believe at corporates, the team unit is the future unit of success. It used to be the CEOs and the C-suite. It used to be the individual, the worker bee. But no, the rubber hits the road at the team level. And that is the hardest thing to do, even now distributed, when you have teams that people don't even meet them in person. Accenture calls the need for agile teams and a healthy team toolkit the most important need for the future of successful companies. We actually deliver the first tool for creating or delivering not self-awareness for a person, but self-awareness for a team, or a healthy team toolkit where that team can understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and their blind spots, and therefore be more agile. Just like an athlete might want to be not just right-handed, but left-handed, a team that's only made up of decisive people might need to learn how to be deliberate, or a team of only self-starters might need to learn how to be more team-oriented and belonging in what motivates them. And so looking at the behaviors, the motivations, and the work styles of a team is crucial to success in work, sports, love, and family and community. And it is a driving force that I think gives everyone energy on this planet.
When you do talk about teams, though, again, I couldn't agree more. And the one thing that always surprised me, at least in the federal government, and I don't know, I would assume it's corporate world too, but whenever you look at like performance standards or performance appraisals, it's always done about the individual, right? It's never about the team. And it always struck me as so odd because nothing, no matter, and to your point, no matter how high I went in an organization, it still took an entire team for us to deliver anything, right? And so we just don't do things individually as much as we like to maybe think we do. And so I really like that you're focusing in on how do we improve that whole team environment versus just simply the individual.
Yeah, it's follow up from the previous podcast we did with Chip Fulgham. He referenced several times, the team he worked with. He even mentioned, like, in his career, like he said we had the dream team, or if we were ever going to accomplish something like so incredible again as we did then, we'd want to have the dream team together. And I was looking at it from the other side, working for Angie, but also seeing these different players. And when Chip came in, it was the first experience I had where I said, wow, the senior leadership really is working together cohesively with each other, and I can see that they actually like each other. They're having a good time in their roles, and I think it was from the seat I had a period of time where I said, wow, things seem more fun, we seem more effective, and we're hitting our various metrics more easily, and of course morale along with that increase. So I concur with Angie. The team aspect does energize an entire organization as well, propel individuals forward.
I think it kind of goes to that energy, from an energy standpoint, like you were talking about, right? I heard you say like you vibrated a higher energy. And I know, Lynette, we often talk about this as well, right? Like whenever you go into a room, like you can feel the energy in a room. And so you can feel it from an individual, you can feel it from the team. You can, it's either vibrating high or it's vibrating low. But I think being in tune with that and understanding like what you are feeling and then how you contribute to that is also, I think, just as much an important factor in ensuring that the environment is again vibrating at a level in which using Dominic's word, where you're not only having fun, but you're successful too. And I think somehow we got away from that and we started to think that everything has to be about the measures and the metrics and how do you know you're going to be successful? And once we started doing that, it seemed like we kind of in some ways took even the fun out of the whole work environment. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't get results, because as Dominic knows, I was very result driven. I wanted us to succeed and to accomplish what we said after, but I also wanted to do it in such a way that like we at least again enjoyed the day while we were doing it, because we spent so much time together.
What's funny about you saying that, Angie, is that when we ask our executives after our client executive sponsors, what's the word internally, what's the feedback, and we do surveys now more formally, but after 2 months of a pilot, the word that most people say about our platform is, yeah, we collaborate better, we're more productive, we understand our weaknesses and strengths, we're more agile. But the word that everyone says, I can't believe how fun it is to use a tool like this. And so I always joke that we're the first enterprise software in the corporate world that leads to productivity, better collaboration, but that's also fun. And people can't believe it, but fun is like one of our benefits. Whereas most things that are fun at work, usually the companies don't want employees to touch or use.
Right. Exactly. And like using humor is like gives you such an advantage. We used to sometimes say, look, we can cry or we can laugh. We can go either direction with this workday. And so I think, again, maybe this isn't an overused word, but we were very conscious about making sure that the day was fun, that we laughed at each other, not just with each other, but at each other. And we did, some of the things that I think built these most successful teams. Now, had we had, as you and I talked, had we had a tool like what you have actually created, I think it would have taken it to a whole new level, or at least would have allowed us to scale that kind of fun environment in a way that we weren't able to do just, by ourselves. Dominic, did you have any other any questions?
Yeah, well, I heard my favorite word in there, conscious, maybe like a different context. Yeah, Juan, so I know you in the human intelligence domain, the software domain, you're looking at creating top performers, smarter collaboration, and you've also, from the recruiting side, of course, you're looking to identify individuals that are top performers. What are the traits that you can share of, like, the people that do become these top performers, traits that you're looking for consistently for these, say, C-level positions or people that are succeeding? And what dimension of consciousness do you think plays in that?
Okay, so 3-part question. I'll address it. That's like a good one. People's careers and successful people from graduating college at 22 to 35. It's really about skills and specific content knowledge, and you can really get promoted. But 35 to 55, where it's becomes less about skills and content and more leadership, all the way up from 35 to C-suite, whatever age that may be, is really leadership and management. And so, at least in the United States. And so when I was a headhunter for the 2 largest search firms in the world, officially an executive search consultant, Heidrick and Struggles and Korn Ferry, which I worked each one for 4 years before launching my own search firm, I became very good at identifying successful executives. There were several traits, and it was easy to find people with great resumes who've attacked this right business challenge for that industry in that city. And now with remote and hybrid, we could find people anywhere, so it became even easier to find execs. But what was the distinguishing factor in what made me go from the top 20 out of 500 resumes, the top 20 people that I interviewed, to the 5 I presented? And I was very successful at it. And some of those traits are the following. They're executives that are agile. Okay. So agile in that they know how to be decisive, and that's their natural tendency, but they also know how to be deliberate, depending on context. They know how to be a self-starter, but also be a team follower. So being, having the duality around behaviors, motivations, and work styles always identified quickly a great leader. That'd be one thing. And that's what Humantelligence was used early on to test for at the executive level. 2, self-awareness. And obviously you need self-awareness to be able to have the duality around behaviors, motivators, and work styles. But I mean self-awareness where, you can tell what other people like and don't like about you. One of my favorite interview questions at the end of a interview with an executive was, how do people misperceive you when they first meet you and work with you for 3 weeks? And why do you think that is? It's the best question I've ever come up with. The best executive ever, who I just think they're my finalist, often bombs that question, because some people start answering a strength or weakness. Some people that try to look good. Some people say that they're not misperceived, which they're automatically ejected from the process, because everyone is misperceived. There's no person on the planet that is not misperceived. We all have different tells and things and tics and movements and physical, and just everyone is misperceived. When you look back at your career, there is a pattern. And so you can course adjust and do things, but that kind of self-awareness of understanding how you're perceived by others is one of the most important traits of a successful C-suite exec. And then to your last point, so we talked about consciousness. This third aspect, I do believe people who are higher level executives and perform better are more conscious, because they do have the duality. They do have the self-awareness. They are tapped into knowing that they don't have all answers, and they know that the information will be sourced from humanity, from others, whether it's their teammates, their company, other sources outside the company, if they meditate, from the grid of all knowledge. But they know that they're not going to be the ones who have the answers. And that's consciousness, to know that we're all connected and that all answers are out there. And how do I plug into that? So I do believe that consciousness is one. And the last one is judgment. The fourth and last one I'll give you is judgment. Great leaders and C-suite execs have great judgment. And I first realized this, that, I interviewed about 3,000 people a year for about 10 years, right? So 30,000 people, all executives, CIOs, CFOs, CEOs. And I started to see a pattern. And although it's, quote, illegal to ask, I was often running my own show. I'm just curious about human beings. And it is interesting to know, because I also don't want to break up families. I would ask at the end of the interview, by the way, are you married? Do you have children? How old are your children? And so, contact the recruiting police. But 30,000 people, I would say, there might have been 100, maybe, I'm guessing, I can't even remember 10, but maybe 100 of 30,000 people were actually divorced. Think about the judgment it takes for such a high percentage of executives to pick a spouse correctly, the hardest and the most complex decision in life. Because it's harder to have a 30 or 40-year marriage than run a company of 10,000 employees. Your employees report to you. They'll do what you say. A spouse and children is the most complex work environment you'll ever come across. And if you can manage a family for 30, 40 years successfully, a company you can do with your pinky. And so imagine my astonishment that all these executives that I'm interviewing, all the best ones, all the middle average ones, they're all married, and they're still married, and they all had families. And I thought, that's crazy. That's like the secret that no one knows. But it makes sense, because to make the right choice at a young age for the right partner, you have to have super well-developed judgment early in your career, which doesn't go away. It only gets better with time. So that's the last data point, is around judgment.
It's so fascinating that you would, at least the examples that you gave to go with the words, right? So when you were saying about judgment and about marrying well and stuff, and staying married. So here's one thing, as a female executive, I would often be asked, especially by women, they would often say to me, what was like the secret to your success? What did you do? And I said, listen, if you're going to get married, marry well, because you need to make sure that you have a partner who completely supports you throughout all of this, right? And so, as I was like coming up through the ranks, and I remember we had 2 young kids, I was traveling all the time, but my husband chose to have a job that was like a 7 to 3:30 kind of job. So he could get the kids on and off the school bus. He could go to the parent teacher conferences, so it was a sacrifice that he chose to do so that I could have the career that I have, and I did end up in the C-suite. So it is.
You had good judgment. You
So
picked well.
Yeah, so I did pick well. And so anyhow, it's just fascinating that you would say that. And then the second point that you brought, and Lynette, this just kind of reminds me of you and me whenever we first met. And it's about having self-awareness of how people perceive you, right? And so I would say, like, most of the time, and throughout the years, I started to understand and realize that most people, and it'll be interesting to hear Dominic's take on this too. Most people, when they first meet me and I know that they perceive me as being a little aloof or a little untouchable, or not necessarily playing at the field level, if that makes any sense. And so, and I know for Lynette, like Lynette shared with me, like, it was intimidating, right? Or people will say that I intimidate them. And I'm always thinking to myself, I don't understand how in the world I am intimidating. But I became more and more aware of the fact that I was giving off at least that impression that, that I tried to work really hard not to. But I don't know, Dominic, did you have that same impression?
It didn't strike me as intimidating. One thing that came up is that I noticed you had very strong enthusiasts and supporters around you. You had people that spoke very well of you, and completely unprompted. And obviously it happened when you were in the room, but quite frequently it happened when you were not in the room.
Well, that's even better.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it might be called sucking up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was something that was new, because the position that you're in, I encountered several people that had been in that role, and in contrast, it was kind of the cult of X, the person in that role, and then the cult of Y, the person in that role. And I'd say with you, it's definitely much more of Angie's team. This is what we are trying to do. So it really felt like an effort where you had friendship, support with your different members of your leadership team.
Well, that's interesting that you had, because Lynette's impression of me, or at least perception of me, and Lynette, you can expound on it, is more typical of what I feel like folks would say about me.
Actually, though, it's interesting because I met you first before I knew what you did. And I got to know you a bit before I knew what you did. So I think I was intimidated by the title, but not you. And I was trying to make a parallel of pulling the two together, because it did seem that it didn't fit. Because I got to know you in a more relaxed atmosphere outside of work. So it was interesting then once I found out, what you did. Because I was like, well, that's not my perception of who you are. Yeah. But then that does go to how we can allow titles and things to create a perception that's not true. We've created our own story about what we think the reality of a person is, and how often we don't actually get to know the person without allowing that to be the truth that we see.
Right.
And a practical version of consciousness that's not spiritual, but just, I believe people live consciousness even without being spirituality, is seeing through all the titles, labels, and tribal nomenclature, right? Seeing through all these things and just looking at a human being and that soul for what comes out of their mouth and who they really are, right? What's their true vibration? Those are the most successful people in life in any domain.
So, but Juan, okay, I need to explore this a little bit further with you. I completely agree with you. But whenever I would make comments similar to that in the work environment, I would get a lot of pushback, especially, and I will say from folks in the DE&I environment, I would get a lot of pushback saying, but Ange, when you do that, when you're just looking at them, from a soul level, and that's what you're seeing, you're not putting nomenclature on them, title, tribal, or anything else on them, then you're discounting who they really are. And that has never resonated with me, because I always think to myself, no, I'm not discounting at all who they are. All I'm trying to do is say that there's a soul in there that I want to connect to, soul to soul, right? And I don't know why I have to sift through all of these nomenclature. It's a great word. Why do I have to sift through all of that to try to figure out who that person is? So it's interesting that you bring it up, because I struggle with that.
through 40, you would not catch me dead speaking in the language and the words I've actually used even on this podcast. Until I became a well-known executive and I was running the show and I was the top already. Mm-hmm. And then people wouldn't get rid of me for speaking this way. And it wouldn't hurt my promotions. I wasn't comfortable speaking this way and being who I truly am and how I see the world until then. So I agree with you. The world's not there yet and corporate enterprises aren't there yet. But there is a big movement in this whole functional area under HR of wellness, mm-hmm. well-being, mental health, DEIB. It's cracking open the dam with a couple, fissures here and there. But you're right, we're still far from that. But there is a consciousness revolution occurring, and people are becoming more open-minded. People are able to speak about, for instance, culture and intentionality at work. And so you can start to see some of the words creeping into the Fortune 500, and it's not seen as weird, but we're definitely not there yet. Where a 22-year-old hippie should be running around the hallway shouting out kumbaya messages.
Juan, I had thought, hearing you talk, because you use energy and vibration so much, and so sometimes these things can be nebulous or unclear. And I love how you said, here's a practical way of applying it. So, do you have a practical way each for energy and vibration for a person in the workplace to apply those concepts to their benefit?
Well, if I deconstruct the mechanics of being at a high vibration, what does that really mean? It's kind of like the child movie that came out by Disney, Inside Out. We have two voices in our heads as human beings, right? We're animals that have two voices that sound the same, have the same texture. There's the animal whose thoughts and whose drive is based on a world where they are finite, they can die as an animal, as a human being, and they live in fear and scarcity. That's low vibration. Any thought that's negative, any reaction to someone, any feeling of jealousy, any negative thought, it's the animal in us. The high vibration points, and you know them, is when all of your thoughts are positive. They come from a place of abundance. They come from a place of trust. You're positive. That place is a high vibration. And you know the difference because it feels really good to be at a high vibration and people want to be near you and attracted to you. Okay. And it's like molecules that attract. And then there's the place of being a low vibration where people don't like being with you and it's a toxic environment. And so if you want to kind of break down the mechanics of being high vibration or high energy and low vibration to the workplace, just look for places that are really fun to work at, that everyone respects each other, where there's intentionality in what people do day to day as individuals, as two people working together as teams, versus those environments that are toxic, where managers lead by fear. We've all heard that phrase. That's a low vibration manager, where teams, make fun of their boss and vice versa. And people stab each other in the back, and the companies chew employees and spit them out the minute that stock doesn't perform. I was just commenting on a company called Southern Wine and Spirits. A friend of mine, Monica Chaplin's grandfather, started it. I think top 10 largest privately held company. They do all the liquor distribution in the country across most states. And I had a friend applying for the role at that company, and she goes, "I've never heard them. Would they be good to work for?" I said, and this person always complains about the bureaucracy in federal and government organizations where she's worked, and then the attitude of like the large consulting firms like McKinsey and Bain, where they'll have attitude, right? And so I told her, "Hey, this company's great. They care about people. They want you to work there 20 years. They will figure out how to make you happy. That's their whole secret sauce, are their people." And it's funny, I've met probably 30 people from this company, Southern Wine and Spirits, and they all vibrate at high vibration. They all used to work at the top consulting firms and the top consumer products companies, but now they found a home, and like a family that accepts everybody with their warts, right? Because I talk to cousins of mine that if they were just at a bar or at a company, they wouldn't be my friends, but because they're my family, I make the time and I'm more accepting. and I'm more intentional that this is family, their blood, I should be more open. Companies that feel like families, whether they're literally family run and owned or just, well, like a Zappos or a, culture. I don't want to talk out of tune here, but other companies that are just known for these great cultures, they feel like family, they feel like home. And that's a high vibration.
A well-functioning family.
A well-functioning family. But even the Thanksgiving dinner where there's, inevitably the post-gravy fight and, uncle and cousin and young people rebelling, and it's pure chaos, right? Everyone has a warm feeling at a Thanksgiving family event, even if it's not functional, right? So, where if it were a work meeting that wasn't functional, people leave in a low vibration, bar none. So there is this kind of like setting the foundation and just being intentional and just framing an experience of it's positive. Like, of course, we're not all going to see the same. Let me just accept that. But coming from a place of abundance, trust, an infiniteness that that we're all around the globe, not just this life, but the next and the next and the next. When you realize that there's no end to your soul, that you will be here forever, then there's not a rush to get promoted. There's not a rush to be a leader. There's not a rush to achieve X, Y, Z. Take away the framework of time, and every day, every year, every job, every decade feels like that never-ending summer when you were 6 years old. That seemed like an eternity.
Speaking of this, I have one final question for you. And it's funny you would say about being 6 years old, because the question I was going to ask you was,
why are my answers like a 6-year-old's?
No. Close. No, I was going to ask you if you could go back in time, because I was having this conversation with just the other day, and what would you say to your 17-year-old self? Actually, Lynette and I had this conversation at a bar the other day, the other night. And so it's like, because we both were saying to ourselves, if we could go back in time and we could have a conversation with ourselves at 18, what that conversation would be like. And so given where you've gone gone throughout your life and your experiences and everything else, what would you say to yourself if you could go back in time to your 17-year-old self?
3 things. Don't judge others. Don't work for others. All the answers are within. Search within for anything you need to know. We all have all the answers inside.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on consciousness, on top performance at the leadership level, teaming, individuals, etc. I look really forward to diving deeper into the stories behind the stories each month. For more information and to learn more about us, please go to www.anandalife.org. Thank you and have a great day.